Welcome to the Python Fundamentals tutorial, and today we're going to be talking about lists. So let's get right into it. And the first question is, what is a list? Well, a list is a collection of values that can be anything. It can be numbers, strings, anything you want. So I'm going to do list, and to initialize a list, I do my variable name equals, and then I put brackets. In the brackets, I can put a bunch of numbers like this, right? And then I do print list, and when I run that, I just get the same thing I basically just put in, right? Another cool thing about list is they can have numbers and strings in the same list, right? So I can have a string that has all of this data, right? And this won't throw me an error because Python is cool like that. So that's the basic of what a list is. And now we can move on to accessing the items in the list. So lists have indices, right? Just like we discussed in the last video with strings. And the indices start at 0 and move their way up, right? So x equals list 0. And this will give me the first value in the list. And I'm going to set that equal to x, right? So I print my x, and then I do, and I'll get 23 because 23 is the first value in this list, and that's how I can access a list. Another thing that you have to keep in mind when working with a list is the index, right? The index has to be within the indices of the actual list, right? So if I print the 300, 400, I can't even say that number, 3,452nd number in the list, when I try to do that, it says list index out of range. That's because this index doesn't exist within this list. Moving on, we can also print the last element in the list by putting just -1, and that will give me the last element. -2 will give me the second to last, and so on with all the negative numbers. Now we're going to move on to the more complicated things, which is iterating through a list and using list comprehension. So to iterate through a list, what I'm going to do is a for loop, right? So for number, right? So for each number in the list, and then I put a colon. Now you can see it automatically indents it for me, but if your compiler doesn't do that, you have to make sure that everything after this for is indented because that's going to be what's inside the for loop. So for each number in the list, let's do print number. So this is going to go through the entire list and it's going to print it out, right? Oh, you see here that this is the list index out of range, right? So I need to make sure to comment that out. Otherwise, this is going to run and our code won't run like you just saw. So when I print every number in the list, it'll print each number on its own line, right? Because it's trying to go, and every time I do a print, it fills in all this space automatically. Now, this for loop is a pretty powerful tool, but we can't access the index of number. We just know that it is the number. We don't know what position that number is within the list. So there's a really nice workaround to that. So if we look at the list, right, we can do y is equal to the length of the list, right? And that's just going to return how long this list is, okay? But there's also a function called range, right? So if I type in range and then put the length of the list inside, let's see what happens. And see, this printed range 05, right? So what range 05 is, it's every number between 0 and 5, and it doesn't include the last number, okay? So the range 0 to 5 is going to give me 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And as you can see, these are the indices of this list. Now we can use this idea and use it in a for loop, right? So for number in, and instead of putting the list here, I'm going to pass in range, length, list, okay? So this is not iterating through the list, right? This is iterating through this, right? It's iterating through the indices because the range function returns a tuple, which we can get into later, but it's essentially another iterable data type, right? So it's going to return a tuple of these numbers, which are the indices of the list, right? So we're going through each number, And what we can do is we can do print number, and instead of just putting, or not number, we can print, number, but we can print list, and we put in number as the indice, right? So it's like what we were doing over here, where we're accessing the item in the list, right? This time we passed in 0, and this time we're just passing in any number, which is the index. Now, these two are going to do the same exact thing. As you can see, the first one printed this, and the second one printed this, right? So they both did the same thing. It's just that this one keeps track of the index, and that might be useful if, let's say, I wanted to do list number plus equals 5, right? Now I wanted to change every number in the list such that I would add 5 to all of them. This would help me do that because I have the index. If I simply did it with this, right, I would do number plus equals 5, right? But this would print the same thing, but it would not change the numbers in this list. And if we wanted to, we would have to use this workaround. So now I'm going to move on to an example of list comprehension. So let's start off by making a list 3, and I'm going to make it a list of numbers, okay? And you can put whatever numbers you want here. And let's say I wanted to print out all of the numbers in this list that were greater than, let's say, 50, okay? So I would have a for loop for each number in list 3, and then if the number is greater than 50, then print the number, right? So this is going to go through the entire list and check each number, and if that number happens to be greater than 50, it will print it out, right? So we can run this, and you can see right here is where it goes. And we get 135, 8,365, and 85. Those are all greater than 50. So now I can do the same thing that I just did up here with list comprehension, right? So I'm going to set a new list equal to, and here I'm going to put brackets. Then I'll put my expression, which is what I'm going to be returning. So I'm putting num for num in list 3 if num greater than 50. Okay, so we can see the word num here 3 times, so it's a little complicated to look at if you're doing it for the first time. So what this essentially is what we are returning, okay? So the first num is return, right? So what we're returning. The second, right here, this part, is the same as what you can see up here. It's the same thing as looping through. So for each number in list 3, right? And then we put in the if statement right here, which is if num is greater than 50. So this part is looping through with the for, and then this part is our condition. It's going to return our expression if the condition is met, right? So what this is going to do is it's going to go through each number in list 3, right? And if it's greater than 50, it'll go back over here and return num and put it into new list, okay? So I can print new list and run that code, and I can see these are the numbers in the list that are greater than 50, which is the same thing we did here, except this time it printed as a list because new list is a list, right? What we can also do, which is what makes list comprehension so powerful, is we can change the expression. So we can make num plus 45, right? And if I run that, I get all the numbers that are greater than 50, right, who were originally greater than 50, and then I add 45 to all of them, right? 135 plus 45, this plus 45, and this plus 45, and this is what I get. So think of this first part as what we're returning, right? Right here. And then this is our loop, and then this is our condition. So there's a lot of things you can do with list comprehension, and it's very important that you can understand it. That's going to be it for this video, and in the next video, we'll explore the rest of the topics within lists.